Republican Senator Rand Paul is taking aim at fellow Republican Lindsey Graham as he continues his crusade against the so-called Big Beautiful Bill currently being debated in Congress. Paul says the bill is really a vehicle for Graham to secretly explode the military budget. Joining us to discuss, Alexander Bolton, senior staff writer here at The Hill. Hi, Alex. So this critique seems to be emblematic of a larger struggle on the right between defense hawks and isolationists.
That's right. Well, I mean, this bill has $150 billion in it, which is a lot of money, obviously. And Rand Paul says that, he's not voting for this bill because it raises the debt ceiling by $4 to $5 trillion. And his argument, which he made to Larry Kudlow on Fox Business, is that the spending cuts in the bill, which are $1.5 trillion over 10 years, amount to $150 billion a year. And he says that is basically just offsets the new military spending in the bill, which is $150 billion. In addition, there's $150 billion for border security and interior enforcement. So Rand Paul says that this is Congress once again, spending money like a bunch of drunken teenagers. Those were the words that he chose. But absolutely, when deficits are now more than $2 trillion a year, the question becomes, where do you cut? And the answers that fiscal hawks like Rand Paul are pushing is we need to cut from everywhere. And there was a meeting among Senate Republicans on Wednesday afternoon. I mean, some are talking about looking into Medicare, which the president has said should be off limits. So they're finding that spending cuts are very tough to come up with. Elon Musk and Doge, took a look at the federal agencies, the discretionary spending accounts, but beyond that, there's a lot of mandatory spending, there's a lot of defense spending, and what Rand Paul is saying is that this is making the problem worse. Ironically, the defense hawks say that the $150 billion in the bill is barely adequate, and they're complaining already because that money is going to come out to make up for the what they say is an effective cut to the annual appropriations amount for the Pentagon. So the defense hawks and the budget hawks are far apart on this issue.
Criticizing military spending used to be kind of blasphemy inside the Republican Party. For Paul to be able to voice this so loudly and it be, somewhat amplified in the MAGA base, do you think that marks a change inside the Republican Party?
Well, Mitch McConnell, the former Republican leader, who is one of the strongest advocates for more defense spending, I mean, he says that this is nothing new. I mean, his argument is that there's always been an isolationist wing within the Republican Party going back to the 30s when you had Bob Taft, the senator from Ohio. I mean, he opposed the Lend-Lease Act. He's opposed, U.S. involvement in World War II. So Mitch McConnell, who has a pretty good historical perspective, says that this is nothing new. But certainly the isolationist voices, if you want to call that, in the Republican Party, maybe you could call it the America First voices in the Republican Party, they are ascendant because of who's in the White House, Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. And both of them are skeptical about projecting U.S. military power around the world. Trump is kind of portraying himself as a peacenik here, saying he just wants the bloodshed in Ukraine to end, and he's willing, it seems, to offer a pretty favorable deal to Vladimir Putin. So the fact that Trump and Vance are in the White House and the Vice President's house show that are providing a lot of political cover to Rand Paul and amplifying his voice, and others who say there should be less defense spending. But really, Rand Paul has been the most outspoken in saying that the Pentagon's budget needs to be cut. Now, I think there are some Republicans on Capitol Hill who agree with him, but they're kind of hanging back a little bit, and they're not really willing to jump into the spotlight on this.
Well, even you take an issue like the war in Gaza, there are some prominent voices, inside the MAGA coalition that are critical of Israel's prosecution of the war. Traditionally, Israel has been a unifying issue in the Republican Party. Do you see cracks in that in the halls of Congress?
Well, where I'm seeing cracks is over this Iran negotiation, and it seems like where Trump is headed. I mean, we haven't seen the final details of any deal, but there's talk of a side deal that would essentially allow Iran to continue to enrich uranium. And, there are Republicans drawing comparisons between what Trump is negotiating right now with Iran and the uh, JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action that President Obama put together, which was colloquially known as the Iran nuclear deal. I mean, that certainly is splitting Republicans on the issue of Israel. Now, the pro-Israel hawks are very skeptical of this deal as it's emerging, with Iran. Jake Sullivan, as I understand it, Joe Biden's national security advisor, basically is applauding the direction of this deal. So that is something that's, splitting Republicans. Now, as far as Israel's prosecution of the war against Hamas in Gaza, I haven't heard any Republican dissent on that, at least not publicly. Of course, there are Democrats who have criticized that, but I think the Republicans are unified there. Where their split is to what extent to back Trump as he negotiates a peace deal with or a nuclear deal with Iran that could allow it to continue to enrich uranium. That I think would be very problematic with many Republicans on Capitol Hill.
Before I let you go, I wanted to ask you, the military spending, Senator Paul is criticizing just one part of the so-called big, beautiful bill that's making its way through Congress. You have an article out today saying that the bill is losing momentum in the Senate. Elon Musk has become critic number one. Is there a chance that Republicans might actually have to break this thing up and start over?
I think there's a chance that they may. It's a very heavy lift. I mean, from the get-go, John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, wanted to do this bill in two pieces. I mean, that was kind of where Republicans always were. Now, they had a meeting on Wednesday, and Mike Crapo, the chairman of the Finance Committee, basically warned the Republican conference that there are already two no votes here, so they can afford only one more defection because they control 53 seats. If two more Republicans, come out against this bill, it's a major problem. Now, the political reality is everyone realizes it's imperative to deliver Donald Trump a big win here, but this bill is so complex. There's so many moving parts, and there's so many different factions who have different problems with different parts of the bill. So, will it get broken up? Probably not, but I think there is a chance that it could, depending on how things go. And, there are just plenty of disagreements, and there's a critical difference between the House and the Senate. I think in the House, lawmakers are more subject to pressure or more responsive to pressure from the White House. The senators have more independence. They serve 6-year terms. The chamber was set up by the founding fathers to act as a brake or a check on the presidency, to be the cooling saucer, if you will. So, we'll see whether Trump can, twist arms as effectively in the Senate as he has in the House. So, there's a ways to go before this bill is in the Senate, and that's why some Republicans like Ron Johnson say there's no chance that you're going to be meeting the July 4th deadline set by President Trump to get this to his desk.
How big of a deal is Elon Musk's criticism on this? Obviously, he has very deep pockets, a huge mouthpiece, but if he's no longer tied at the hip to President Trump, does he pack the same punch? How much do Republicans in Congress care about what he says now?
I think they care quite a bit because, everyone is covering Elon Musk's comments. He has a huge megaphone. I mean, X, the social media platform, is a huge driver of the political debate in this country. That can't be denied. So, the fact that Musk is defining this bill as negatively as he has, calling it an abomination, calling it pork filled, this bill already is not tremendously popular, and the Democrats are hammering away at it. I think it's emerging as something of a political liability for Republicans. So when you have Elon Musk completely trashing it, and he's the guy that kind of, if nothing else, established his reputation as the chief budget hawk in Washington D.C. If it doesn't pass the Musk test, it really undercuts the arguments that Speaker Mike Johnson and others are making that this is going to reduce the deficit. So I think it weakens the political momentum behind this bill. So ultimately, Donald Trump is the biggest, he's the biggest megaphone in Washington. He wields the most clout among Republicans. But certainly, I think Musk's attacks are damaging to the efforts to, get this done, at least get it done quickly.
And Republicans say they want to pass this big, beautiful bill before the July 4th holiday. So we'll continue to be following your work because I'm sure you'll have a lot to write about between now and then. For now, we'll leave it at that. Alexander Bolton, thanks so much for your time.
Thanks for having me on.